Welcome to This Week for the Video Game Review, the show where we cover games, news, and features that identify what is and is not working in the meta of gaming. I'm John,
I'm Colin.
and let's begin. These are your top news stories for the week of December 7th to December 14th, 2016. Overwatch just recently released the holiday edition of Overwatch, where you get to have new skins, new game mode of Brawl with snowballs, and plenty of coins and loot boxes to buy. So, Colin, are they going to win the Hats War versus Team Fortress 2?
Over, I don't know that. Well, yes, I think this game has largely supplanted the cheesy, gimmicky shooter genre that was Team Fortress 2. Um, but I'm curious for you. It's not something that generally scratches an itch for me, but the sale of hats in games, is that something? Do you find that compelling? Is that a feature that brings you back in? Does it keep you playing a game?
I've spent more money than I care to admit. How about that?
In
You know,
Overwatch?
yeah, I've actually bought. Oh, I don't want to admit this. I've at least bought the 50 box one once.
How much? I don't even
Just
know. How much is a box? I don't even know.
it depends on how many you buy. It actually can range anywhere. I think the 50 box one is like $50. I think they do like $1 a box. I know I've definitely bought the 21 during the Halloween sale, and I'm looking at the one for Christmas, and it's just like, oh, but I want to be Santa Torbjorn, Santa Bjorn, that
So wait,
Bjorn
what are
Claus.
what are your I'm curious. What are your feelings on a full price game like Overwatch selling cosmetics? Essentially, I guess you can't buy the cosmetics directly. You have to buy the boxes, but
Right.
essentially selling cosmetics, a la Dota 2, but Dota 2 is a giveaway. You don't pay anything for the game itself.
Honestly, it's just one of those things that Blizzard has done well. It's no worse than with Hearthstone and buying cards. I mean, you can earn the cards without paying, but I don't know. It's just that itch. Like it's nice. It's a lottery. It's gambling. Really, it's the same thing that they just closed down a bunch of sites for. I mean, the same thing. It's like you're betting on whether or not this item's going to appear, and so without winning other money, I'm betting on like, oh, I really want that legendary
But
skin. Like when I
as
got
from a cost perspective, though, is this the kind of do you are you fine with them adding content that you can grind, I guess, to try and get there, right? But or
right,
you can spend money to try and get lucky, roll the dice
right.
and unlock a pack. Is that
I mean, I'm completely fine with it. It's not content based. That's probably where my biggest gripe is with
yeah.
games that make anything content based. A la Evolve, who actually locked away content. They admitted later on it, saying, "Oh, you can't be these monsters unless you pay real world dollars." To go, "Oh, okay, cool. So you only gave me 15% of the game you promised." Versus Overwatch is like, "Here's the entire game. Here's new maps. But if you want to look cool, fork over some cash. I'm okay with that. If you're like me who wants to be the glamorous little somber horror that I am, I'm gonna go buy the skin. But if you want to just play the game and enjoy the game and not have to care about how you look, you're fine paying the price
Yeah.
tag.
Yeah,
You
I'm
don't have to do.
I'm with you. I'm with you. It's same thing here. I don't mind it. Same thing with Dota 2. I think it's great. It's not the kind of thing that and not that I've never spent money. I don't know that I've paid anything for Dota, but I do think I bought a box once in Overwatch, maybe. But it's rare that I do that. But it's this kind of thing. If it's cosmetic unlocks and those kinds of things, I don't mind those things. But actually discussing Dota 2, I think that sets us up nicely for our next news item of the week. And huge update to Dota 2 this week. So Defense of the Ancients 2, Valve's hyper successful entrant in the mobile arena, had really their biggest patch in I think it was something like a decade. So we've been on the 6 point something system for a number of years now. The patch has rolled over to 7.0, and as I've seen floating around the internet, and I think this is accurate, this is really kind of the closest we're going to get to a Dota 3, I think, ever. Honestly, massive changes, not just additional heroes, but massive changes to gameplay, massive changes to maps in a game that's famous for having only one map, um, and massive changes to a game that really rewards thousands of hours of play and encourages thousands of hours of play. And so, really, pretty dramatic changes taking place. So dramatic and so much anticipated. Valve put a countdown leading up to the release of the patch notes, and the website crashed. Um, For a while, I know. I don't remember the exact amount of time, but I remember logging in to try and check as much as an hour later, and I wasn't able to see the patch notes. So there was definitely they were definitely generating a lot of demand. Now you and I both put a fair number of hours uh,
Yeah.
into Dota 2, John. So just kind of and you don't play now, right?
No, I don't. I quit about a year ago due to anger issues and not wanting to break a third mouse.
So that's what I want to get at here a little bit, and not to put you on the spot, but do you mind sharing a little? So you said anger issues. Expand on that for us.
Yep. So on the side, I've also run another channel where it was based on anger gaming, but that's long gone. Dota has that problem for me where it's one of those things where it's a game where you as I play supports and I play mid characters. I don't play carries. And for people who've never played a MOBA before, those are typically the roles that characters play. A character like a carry is somebody who plays long term, who you have to spend a considerable amount of time farming them up, getting them good items, so they'll be completely useful and dominating towards the end of the game.
They start
Support.
weak, get strong, and it
Yep.
is the role of the rest of the team to make sure that the person gets to the point where they're useful.
Yep, correct. I play a core character who starts off pretty strong, not great. They'll get stronger and they carry the mid of the game. So the games typically last anywhere from 30 to minutes to an hour, depending on how good the teams are versus each other. So you could have a very quick game, you could have a very short game, or you could have an extremely long game because the team compositions just played that way. So a core character is a person who can take you through the mid game after the supports are starting to phase out and not be as useful. The core characters kind of come in and keep pushing the team along, keep making sure that you're not going to get the pushback. And that's typically the role I used to play. Or I play support, where early game, they're making sure your carries aren't dying, they're feeding, and not feeding is not the term I want to use. They're protecting the rest of the
Right.
team with spells. They're very strong early game, typically all the way from level 1 to level 6. They are going to be the characters that can dominate and can really set the pace of the game if they're good. They can also ruin the game, but they're the
But
first characters to be able to know if the game is going south and quickly.
so what pushed you out though?
Well,
What was the reason for you moving away?
it was the toxicity of the environment. MOBAs and a lot of online gaming has gotten slack for having very toxic environments, toxic players. However, Dota and League of Legends is known and pretty much legendary for how toxic their environments are. You can get on a team, your own teammates, if you're going solo, will insult you, even if you didn't do anything wrong, just because it's the nature of the game. Combine that with my ability to get frustrated extremely quickly. I didn't want to play anymore. It wasn't
Yeah.
enjoyable. I compared my win loss ratio to an enjoyment. So if I assumed if I'm at 50-50, I don't enjoy losing. I can say that as God's honest truth. I hate losing. And I will always admit that. But my winning bracket, I probably did not enjoy 50% of that. That means out of a game I've spent 1,000 plus hours on, 750 of those, I didn't enjoy the game. What the
Right.
hell is wrong with me?
Yeah.
So I
And
decided I'm out.
that was something that and so thank you for sharing. I wanted to bring that up because I thought it's interesting that and correct me if this is wrong because I'm not a League of Legends player and I know you're not either, but I think you might be a little more plugged in than I am to
Right.
this. I know to my knowledge, League has taken more aggressive steps to address toxicity in their game.
Right.
I don't know how successful it's been. Um, and
From
similar,
reports, it really hasn't been. Not to cut you off, I apologize,
no,
but
no,
it seems like it's not addressing the issues as well as they hoped it would.
but
There's still a lot of reports coming out saying like you will still get flamed for making one wrong play.
but nevertheless, the idea here, I was not surprised, but it's a game that I largely I don't play solo when I do play, and I
Mm-hmm.
largely stop playing a lot because of similarly the reasons you highlighted. I found that particularly when I was playing by myself, just the toxicity of the community just didn't make it fun, even when I was winning. Now, when I'm playing in Dota, what they call a five stack, and you have a full team made up by a complement of your friends, um, it's a lot more enjoyable, I find. But given how rarely that seemed to come up, it was something and I've not seen, and maybe they do, but I haven't seen anything really from Valve working to address that aspect of the game. And to my knowledge, Dota 2 is pretty notorious for the toxicity of its gaming community. So it's kind of interesting took all this time to really upset the balance of a game that's you people spend thousands of hours mastering, and they didn't address um, what seems like an important issue to me.
Right. And for Valve's interpretation of it, and they don't want to get involved with the toxicity necessarily. They're going to let the community self-regulate themselves because at that point, they're going to limit what people can and can't say. I know Rocket League was one of the systems that if you're crossplay, so if somebody's in PlayStation and you're on the
Mm.
computer, all you can see is the standard messages that you can send with your D-pad or whatever the PlayStation controller is because I play on PC. So sorry, I don't know. But you can spam it, but it's minimized. In Hearthstone, you can spam things, but you can also squelch the opponent. So they do take some liberties to allow you to control your
Expand on
communication.
squelch.
Squelch. So what it is in Hearthstone, you can right click on your opponent's portrait. It'll say squelch or unsquelch. You can squelch, and it will completely silence them. You can't hear any
Mm-hmm.
emotes from them. So some characters like to people like to sit there and continuously every play they'll say something. Now sometimes it's nice, like they'll send a greeting and that's all they'll send. But on the opposite side, some people will literally spam every time the message comes up, and there is no regulation on it. So nothing like after 2 or 3 messages,
Mm-hmm.
it slows down the timer. It is repeat and repeat. And it is frustrating because it becomes annoying. And there have been complaints where the text box actually covers part of the game scene, so it can actually screw up if you're trying to target
It gets
somebody.
to a point where it can hinder gameplay.
Right, and it's just not enjoyable. And the developers said that they don't want to include an auto squelch because it takes away from the players being able to communicate. Where most people are saying, if people want auto squelches because they don't want to communicate, why can't we have it? So there's
Right.
definitely been a backlash from the community back to Blizzard, and Blizzard responding back saying, we're not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But going back into Dota 2, they're not going to do anything. You can mute teammates. I mean, they gave you that feature. So again,
Right.
like the squelching feature. But for the most part, it's not easy to do. You actually have to like hold commands back, and it interrupts your gameplay in a way that you almost don't want to do it. Or what happens is
Right.
because Dota 2 is so strategic in a game where if you silence somebody who is flaming you or, just an obnoxious 14-year-old, sorry, 14-year-olds, but you guys kind of got that for you. You could miss a key piece of information later in the game where they're saying something crucial, and now because you don't want to hear them, you're going to miss that. Now, are you the deterrence and the hindrance to the game, or are they?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Valve's sitting back going, yeah, you guys can figure that out on
Right.
your own.
Yeah. Hands off the wheel, definitely.
Yep. Okay. So next in news is Nintendo NES Classic. So Nintendo goes and says, "Here, we're going to make a plug and play console, and we're not going to make a lot of them." So there was a massive shortage to start off. Nintendo recently this week has put out more consoles that are going out very quickly, with Amazon Prime jumping on, as well as CNET and other sites pointing out where you can buy these consoles. They
So,
offer 30. Yep.
yep. So quickly, just not that I can't imagine there's anyone watching this channel who doesn't know, but just in case you don't, the NES Classic is a single function Nintendo console. So all it does one thing. It's pre-packed with 30 classic NES games. It's not expandable. It doesn't go online. There's no online multiplayer. There's no streaming. No other services like that. It's $60, so it's dirt cheap. It does its best to emulate the experience, even visual imperfections, bugs, cheats, all those kinds of things that existed at the time that you would have played these games on classic NES cartridges. It does its best to emulate those things digitally. So pre-packed with 30 NES classic games, and it's been popular. It's been kind of it's been one of the go-to gifts of the holiday season, and lots of folks, like you said, are crying foul, saying Nintendo's they've intentionally shorted their supply to generate demand, or they're grossly incompetent because this was announced, I believe, over the summer. It was clear that there was going to be significant demand, and
Mhm.
here we are with it selling out in a matter of hours the second it goes live.
See this? This is the second time in 2 years Nintendo's done the exact same thing. For those who don't know what this is a Nintendo Amiibo. It is a peripheral to the 3DS and the Wii U, which allows you to unlock content or actually have a special character in Super Smash Bros. To play along with and level. What does it mean for people like me? Is try getting your hands on one of these when they first came out. They were impossible to find unless you wanted Luigi or Peach.
and
This
they
is not Nintendo's first time doing this, and they are masters of pretending that, oh, we have such a shortage, please forgive us.
and do you think, in your opinion, is this an intentional shortage? Is this an intentional
Oh, this is definitely an
to
intentional shortage. This is marketing for them because they know that if they overproduce, there's a chance for them to sit on the shelves and they can't drive hype. Nintendo thrives on a hype. They don't understand how to give players what they want, but they know that if they give a product out there that players can't get a lot of, the players themselves will go and drive the hype for it.
in the pre-show you asked, and I thought it was really, or you were talking a little bit about who is this for?
Right. I mean, for most players like you and me, we have access to these games already. I mean, you showed off your 3DS. Here's mine. I can still play The Legend of Zelda. I just completed it for Zelda month in November. For those who don't know what Zelda month is, Peanut Butter Gamer, a famous YouTuber, runs Zelda month, where he'll do Zelda-based videos, and then his friends and colleagues will actually produce Zelda content. So I, in hopes and joining in, played the original Zelda. But guess what? I have it on my 3DS. I don't need to go out and spend $60 more on a small little NES replica to play it. So who is it marketing to? I mean, my mom, my dad, maybe
Well,
like people
that's what
who
I'm
played that.
wondering. Is this for Gen Xers, millennials who are not gamers in the
I-
traditional sense of the word? People who maybe grew up, they had an NES in the house, but they may have not even been the predominant player. Maybe they haven't really played games in the last 10, 15 years, and this seems like an affordable way to kind of relive those memories. Is that
This is Tamagotchi all over again. It's gonna be hot for 3 weeks and then shelved, and nobody's gonna talk about it except in a meme.
I do think I I don't know how persistent it will be. Maybe it'll be over quickly, like you said. Maybe it won't. But I do think this is going to be a product that ends up sitting untouched on people's entertainment stands um, for quite a while. Probably not as much as they're anticipating out of there
Yeah.
when they're first picking it up.
I mean, the other market or target that I could see is people who didn't have access to the Nintendo system at some points, where maybe they were Sega players, maybe their parents hated them and decided that you're only going to get a PlayStation and that's all you're going to get, and completely missed the Nintendo era. So maybe it's good for these guys who never got into it to go grab a copy and say, "Hey, I didn't get to live this in my childhood, and so maybe I'll get a chance now." That's a good marketing area, but the way they're pulling it off, you're really not going to pull them in because like, oh well, I guess I can't get access to it. I wasn't interested in before, so maybe I'm still not now.
That's a good point. I wonder how sustainable the demand is if they're not able to fill that demand, particularly once we get past the holiday season. It seems sustainable at least through the Christmas season because
Mhm.
it's on Christmas lists. Um, but how much staying power does it have if demand continue if supply rather continues to be an issue following the holiday? I don't know how persistent. I think I agree with you. I'm imagining a pretty quick drop off at that point.
Right. I mean, from the 30 games that you can play on it, there are probably a good handful that people actually do care about. Would be the Mario series, Zelda. You might want to play Final Fantasy. I was a huge fan of Bubble
Is
Bobble,
Final Fantasy on
but
it?
yes, it is. Yep. So a lot of these games are going to be ones that they're very difficult
Look at
to
that!
play.
You may
Like
have just
Ninja
sold me
Gaiden.
one.
On. Like Ninja Gaiden was on there too. Ninja Gaiden's notoriously hard. But some of these things are like they're arcade classics. They're not meant to
Right.
be played in long durations.
Yeah.
So you're probably looking at with these kind of games, I mean, you if you're good, you can finish Super Mario Bros. 3 in under 3 hours. So
Oh
you're
man,
looking at
I
maybe for
must be
60
bad at
bucks.
Super Mario Brothers 3.
I've played way too much of it. I have a bad habit of that. But I mean, you're gonna pay 60 bucks, you're gonna get about the same playtime as a full-length game. But now you got a piece of hardware besides just a box that sits on your shelf behind
Yeah,
me.
that's
Got a little piece of hardware going. Oh, cool! I have a mini NES to go shelf. I don't
that's
know.
yeah, the single use is what really kills me. But for $60, I guess if you're getting a full game's worth out of it for something that's not a whole lot bigger than, well, it's not bigger than even a game case, you know,
Right.
maybe it's fine.
So we turn from the news to our gaming choices of the past week, and where are we right now? So between Colin and I and our future topics we'll get into, I've been playing Valkyria Chronicles. And they're going to be releasing another one, Valkyria. God help me, I can't remember the next one. Revolution or something other.
Hmm.
I don't
I
know.
think that's right. I think that's right.
Revolution, right? So I'm I'm gonna hold off on my opinion on this one till the next segment. You'll understand why.
Okay. Okay. I'm not going to be so kind. I will share my opinion. So I am playing, and again, as John noted, both of the games that occupied for most of our last week um, speak to our next segment. But I've been playing Undertale, um, and I think most people at this point, John, was Undertale a 2015 or 2016 release? 2015, right?
15. Yep,
2015.
2015. But
Yeah,
it was in October 2015, so it dominated 2016.
it was an indie breakout.
Yep,
I think
by Toby Fox.
yeah, single developer, right?
Yep, Toby Fox built it on his own.
Yeah.
Music and everything too.
Yeah. It's so it's impressive in that regard. Not graphically impressive, but it is impressive in terms of scope and vision and ingenuity. Um, if I had a great and to be fair, I'm not done with it. I think I've got about 4 hours in at this point. I'm pretty sure that's about how far I am, and I think maybe that's halfway. I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's ending where I am, and that
Where
probably
are
includes
you?
dying a little bit. Um, uh, with I'm trying to figure out how to describe where I am. Um, it's
Let's be
tricky.
fair. If people haven't played Undertale
Well,
yet,
I'm just thinking
yeah.
I don't know how to describe it in a way that even makes sense, to be honest, about where I am narratively. But I've got about 4 hours in, and if I had a complaint, um, I don't actually. I heard a lot of good things about the puzzles. I heard a lot of good things about um, the ingenuity, the creativity of the battle system, and I kind of think it all overstays its welcome. There's there's parts where you have to fight. Um, and I'll say I'm taking the passive route or whatever the non-aggression route in the game, which means I can kind of talk my way out of situations with enemies. And there's a couple fights where you have to fight the same enemy multiple times or for a long period of time, and it's just a circular pattern. You pick a conversational choice, you essentially play a little mini game, and then you get a funny little quip, a little quote from the character that you're fighting, and then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And some of it's really tedious. It's funny in how clever it is at first, but when the gameplay is so painfully simple, the tedium sets on fast. And it just I got the sense that you know what I almost would have preferred if this game um, did not focus so much on having a clever battle system and was more like an old fashioned point and click adventure, because where this game
Hmm.
is really great is in the writing, it's in the tone, it's in the jokes, it's a game that's genuinely funny. It's and despite that, and despite the really strange art style, Toby Fox manages to somehow instill a sense of dread in parts of the game. And I don't know if it's the music, I don't know if it's the way certain scenes are lit, but he does manage to do that. And all of those successes, I'm enjoying it as I'm kind of wandering around and just being in the world, enjoying the world building that he's done, and then the game. Then there's a game. It's like someone ruined my story, my interesting, and I don't know why they bothered to throw in bad puzzles to kind of disrupt what is otherwise kind of a really interesting experience. So I'd love if if maybe spent a little more time on the puzzles, made it point and click style. You didn't have to worry about playing these kind of screwy little mini games, and you could just focus on the world building. Because every time I have a battle, I get pulled out of the game and I start to lose interest. But I am gonna finish it. I am gonna finish it because I don't think I've got a ton more time left. I don't think it's real long, so maybe another 4 hours or so.
You'd be surprised.
We'll see. Well, I got about another 4 hours in me, so let's see how it goes from there.
All right, perfect. All right, and with that, it's the holidays. That means stores and game companies are trying to sell you everything they have, from games to consoles, from Best Buy to Steam, and the Steam Winter Sale actually coming up in a few days, I think. You'll find pretty much anything on sale from basic hardware to full-fledged games. I know one of the people that I do karate with just bought 3 games for free. He actually had enough coupons and other stuff. He got 3 games for free. So he's like, "Oh, I got this to play over the winter." So, but here's the thing: how many of those games do you actually play? You go back in your backlog and look and go, "Huh, I've played one of the 33 things I have sitting here." Same reason why Colin's playing Undertale and I'm playing Valkyria Chronicles is we want to go back in our libraries and actually try to pick out something that we did not play when we bought it. So, Colin, when you bought Undertale, why did you buy it?
First, did I buy Undertale or did you
You
buy
did
me
not.
Undertale?
I bought you Undertale.
That's okay. I thought that was true. That
I bought
said,
it for you for Christmas last year.
and so there you go. Perfect example of a back catalog. Um, so we went back and but I had heard of Undertale and I was interested in the game, and I'd been hearing a lot of, and I think I got a lot of praise for its music at the time. I remember reading articles about the music design in the game, and I think that's right. I think it is really atmospheric. It really draws you in. Like I was saying, it somehow manages, despite a frankly ridiculous looking, um, visual aesthetic. Um, it the world building is excellent. You get pulled in. It's funny. It's kind of tense. It's emotional in ways that I didn't think it would be, or didn't think that that graphic style would have the capacity or capability to convey. And so I'd heard all of these things, but I'd been resistant because I saw the graphics. Frankly, I was resistant, and the other thing I was concerned with is I think sometimes there's an urge in I think gamers and yeah, I think gamers want um, gaming to be an art form, and I think there's a desire and a rush to call games art when they do anything different or unique or interesting. And so I think sometimes that leads to praise, or can leads to praise of games that aren't necessarily um, can lead to undue praise, not necessarily. Um, and a game I'm thinking of is Shadow of the Colossus. Great game. I loved Shadow of the Colossus, but I think there's a lot of hyperbole about Shadow of the Colossus that isn't necessarily true. I think there's a lot of camera struggles with that game. And so anyway, I was concerned that Undertale was that kind of thing. I thought there was a rush to praise because it was doing some interesting things, and the community wanted to just hold this up as this is art. This is art in gaming. And so I was
Right.
thinking like, oh, it's not going to be that good. It's a lot of hype. I'm not going to be actually that interested in it. And um, yeah, so I that's why I haven't been able to get myself to pick it up. And so when we sat down to do this piece and you looked through my back catalog, I was kind of glad you were like, no, you know what, you have to sit down and play Undertale, because I was like, I should probably experience so I can at least know whether or not those presumptions of mine, whether or not there was any truth or reality to that. Um, and so your game was Valkyria Chronicles.
Mm-hmm.
It was a game that I so I played Valkyria Chronicles on the PlayStation 3 um, a number of years ago now, and I remember enjoying it. I'm beginning to get the sense that you did not. So first,
So,
tell us where you got Valkyria Chronicles, why you picked up Valkyria Chronicles, and what your experience has been.
so with my previous channel, I was trying to go find games that are interesting that would basically pull me out because one of the things that I wanted to do, and similar with this channel, was to go and try to develop and discuss things that are interesting, things that are new, things that will break the mold, that allow you to take a different look at gaming in itself versus just playing anything like Mario Maker, which is hard and makes me scream. So I picked it up, but I didn't get around to it because I think it was a licensing issue with not Konami, whoever, Sega, because Sega hates developers and Sega hates Let's Players because Sonic wasn't enough to hate people. So with that, I never played it. It let it sit there. I bought it. I think I bought it at whatever the price was on Steam, so it wasn't full price, but it definitely wasn't cheap. And so I didn't play it. I picked it up for the channel. I didn't play it because of licensing issues and for Let's Plays. So I kind of just let it sit there. I never really had the interest to go beyond it. I know some people like you, a mutual friend of ours, had played it and really recommended it. So I thought okay, I'll come around to it eventually, and I never did. So when you asked me to go play it, I was like, cool, I'll try it. And it is probably one of the slowest starting games I've ever
Mm.
gotten into. And that's been one of the things that I found myself as I've gotten older in age, I can't appreciate the slow starts anymore. I'm very much I want to get into it because I can understand story, I can understand building of worlds actively through the game. I don't need it storybook folded. And actually, if you've ever played this game, it is literally a storybook open and told to you in that manner.
And so
And
you say it's slow. When you say it's, does that mean that, does it feel like it's too much of a tutorial, or are there actual like genuine pacing issues that you feel there?
it's
Go ahead, sorry.
genuine pacing issue. No, you're fine. I apologize for interrupting you. It's genuine pacing. It spends in the first hour, I had 5 minutes of actual things to do from besides just watching the story develop and build the
Hmm.
characters out. Like now, I will tell you, the story is interesting. It is actually probably one of the most compelling things about it, and it's a very stereotypical entering a war kind of
Right.
scenario and developing the hero. And I mean, it is still interesting enough. The art style in it is extremely interesting. However, the fact that the lack of action in it and the action to story pacing, and it actually feels disjointing
And
when
the
you get
action
into the
in a
action.
game about war.
Right. So when you get into the actual gameplay, it's disjointing and pulls you out, similar to like how you were describing Undertale, where it's like, hey, you're ruining this cool movie I was watching. I have to do something now. It's like, so I don't feel immersed into the battle.
Yeah.
And I definitely, and I know it's praised for its combat system. I hate it. I'm sorry.
And now
I've gotten
it's been so
2
long
hours.
for me. Remind me here. I know it's turn based, but that's about all I remember, to be honest.
Right. So it's a cross between a real-time strategy like StarCraft or Civ 5 and then a first-person shooter. So another game that did this is Transistor, one that I played and I will actually sing praise of it versus this one. Now, what it is you go in and you have amount of moves that you can make per turn. When you select a character, you're allowed to move X amount of space and then take one action. Typically, it's fire your gun at the enemy, but it's very broken up in a way that doesn't feel. To me, it didn't feel good. It's like it goes partly to like, okay, I have to strategically put my characters here and move, and things are going to happen. And then there's like the first person shooter aspect of it, or over the shoulder shooter, like
Hmm.
what Gears of War was, or RE4, Resident Evil 4. And then you get into it, and it's like, okay, I made this action happen, and then you're pulled out, and you got to do it again, and then you keep repeating until you're out of these command points. And I had no problem like beating the battles, like that wasn't the game's not hard,
Hmm.
but it's just like you're hitting you're scratching the surface of one of the areas like a real-time strategy or an FPS. And I don't feel like it's blended well together.
Mm-hmm.
So for
Hmm.
me, I'm happy I didn't play it for the channel because I would have complained more about the game and the battle system than I would about the difficulty of it.
Yeah.
So, I'm glad I didn't pay full price for it, but it makes me wonder about the rest of the games on my back catalog going, what was I thinking at the time?
Yeah, and that's a really that's a nice segue, I think. So, this was our endeavor to, appreciate. I guess it's the holiday season. We were trying to appreciate what we already have instead of asking for more. In both cases, I think what John and I discovered was we want the new things instead
Yes.
of what was sitting in our back catalog. But I've got quite the back catalog. I think I've got Steam alone. I think I've got 122 games, 127 games, something like that,
Yeah.
and many of them, and only 15 are installed right now. If I can give you any, if that gives you a frame of reference, and those are the only games I play, pretty much,
Yep.
are those 15 games. Similarly, my PlayStation 4 has a massive, massive back catalog of games. Particularly, I'm a PlayStation Network, PlayStation Plus subscriber. They give you 2 free games a month. I don't download all of them, but I download quite a few of them. Um, as long as you remain a PSN subscriber, you get to keep the games. So they're sitting there on my hard drive, most of them untouched,
Hmm.
um, taking up space. So I've built up quite and I don't know, I can't even tell you honestly why why I pull them down. And you've got quite the back catalog yourself, right? Of unplayed
Right.
games just sitting in your
Yeah.
Steam library.
Yep. I mean, I have that when I had the Nintendo Wii U too. It's all about collecting. I have
Mm.
it. It's mine. I can get at it when I want to, but we really don't want to. It's like that extra helping at Thanksgiving. It's like I know I don't want it, but I'm gonna take that extra mashed potatoes real quick just because I can.
Yeah, you know what's and that's actually got a great analogy in that like you it's not so much you're not doing it to actually feed a need. It's because you
Hmm.
enjoy the acquisition. Um,
Right.
and
It's
that's an interesting way to put it.
it's Steam's versions of hats. I own all these games. Look, hooray! I own everything.
Which
I don't
those
play any of
Steam
them.
bundles, man, those'll get you. If you are new to PC gaming, stay away from the bundles. They're gonna get you every
Yeah.
time. They'll say, "Oh, you want to get like a Star Wars bundle," and you know what? You had really fond memories of Knights of the Old Republic, so you'd look for $60, I can get 24 Star Wars games. Mind you, you will play none of them because they're all from 1998, and for most of us, I think this is true, or at least, okay, I won't speak for everyone. For myself, the graphics goggles back to 1998 are pretty rough, meaning that these are some difficult games to view. They just look ridiculous. Characters with perfectly square heads and painted on faces, and the voice acting
Well,
is often terrible. But anyway,
come on. The Golden Eye look is all in still.
right. But Steam
That's
does they pack these games together, and that's where a lot of my excess games came from. Was just I was nostalgic for one particular game in a bundle or one particular property like Star Wars, and I said, "Ah, you know what the heck? I was gonna spend $20, for another 20, I can get all these other games, and maybe I'll play one or two of them."
not to go off tangent, but this is twice you've brought up graphics goggles. Now, you and I have had multiple discussions about this before, but
Hmm.
kind of allude to everybody what is it for graphics goggles so people understand, literally what you're seeing and why it drives you up a wall versus someone like me who I actually pine for those kind of graphics.
And I'll say I want to preface here. I actually think so. What graphics goggles are, real quickly? Graphics goggles means um, you look back, kind of. It's trying to go back to play a game that you may have played 10, 15 years ago, or not even that long, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, but you're looking at the game with modern sensibilities. So you're used to the graphical fidelity of contemporary games. And these games that you remembered very fondly, and maybe with a kind of visual richness in your memory, that just doesn't exist anymore when compared to contemporary games. Now, when I mostly complain about graphics goggles, meaning like it's hard for me to get back into a game because I'm looking at them with modern eyes and thinking like, oh, these games look terrible. Where that's true, I think, are games of the PlayStation 2, original Xbox era, PlayStation 1 era, um, these Nintendo 64. Really, when they were kind of figuring out 3D and cameras, and you had a large number of games with kind of polygonal models. But I can go back to Sega Genesis, SNES, 16-bit era games just fine. And as long as the art style is interesting and that the sprites are visually rich, I can play those games without much issue. The graphic issues don't bother me there. It's really, like I said, those PlayStation 1 era 32-bit, 128-bit generation games where they were still kind of getting their feet wet. I mean, they were still figuring out first person shooters on the consoles and those kinds of things. And that's honestly part of the reason that so much of my back catalog goes untouched because I buy the
Mhm.
games out of this nostalgic sense, this memory for what it was like to play the games when they were new, and then I go back and camera difficulties that I wouldn't have complained about when I was 12 because that's just what games were. Um,
Mhm.
they bother me now. Where textures being incredibly flat at the time they were visually rich because they were three-dimensional at all, whereas today I find it difficult to actually see what's happening because I've just grown accustomed to kind of like I said, a visual richness that the hardware at the time just wasn't capable of reproducing.
Oh, come on. You don't like the 1 pixel thickness grass?
Right, right. Just grass is one just green line in the dirt.
So you're a rector versus vector kind of guy, where rector being the pixelated graphics versus vector, which is all mathematically computated, where you get your polygons.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I'm looking into rector versus vector for another project, and yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. And like I don't have necessarily a problem going back and playing. My biggest gripe when I go back and play an old game is when they use old tropes that like it was new at the time,
Hmm.
but now it's like we have gotten so advanced in storytelling, we've gotten so advanced in the way gameplay and it feels that for me having a similar issue, it's like the story it uses either a Deus Ex Machina setup, um, or it just writes itself into a wall, and it's like,
Can
I know how this goes.
can you think, and not to shift gears too much, but can you think of a game in your back catalog at any point in your history? So maybe,
Mm.
this was a game, you didn't have to play the game this year even, but has there been a time in your gaming experience where you've kind of rediscovered a game in your library, maybe a year or 2 years or 3 years after everybody played it, or maybe you just didn't have the opportunity to play it at the time, and you went back and it was good. It was great.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. My library's down right now. Oh, that's a great question. That one I didn't.
So I've got
I
kind
was
of a
gonna say, why don't you
I've
go
got a
ahead?
cheating one. It's not um well it so I believe it or not I picked up Witcher 3, brand new. I loved Witcher 2. Um, I was not into PC gaming at the time that Witcher 1 came out. I was just a console gamer. Witcher 1 did not come out on console platforms, but I did play Witcher 2 on, I believe it's the Xbox 360, and then I had a PlayStation 4, and now I've got a gaming PC. And so I picked up Witcher 3 when it came out, and for some reason I found, and it was true at the time, there was a difficulty spike. Or I guess it's not a spike, kind of you started at a very high difficulty in Witcher 3, and it was a little bit of a grind. Um, and I think it was just a combination of when the game came out, what the expectations of my professional life at the time. I just wasn't looking to do something that was going to be that punishing for the first couple hours. And with every intention of coming back to it, I think I played maybe 5 hours. I put the game down and I didn't come back to it for over a year. Um, and then when I did, I I picked it back up and I restarted because it'd been so long. I couldn't even remember the little bit that I had done. So I restarted the game. They'd made some patches and improvements over the interim as well, but I picked the game back up, and I think in a matter of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that, I knocked the whole thing out, and it was incredible. It's a game that I've gone back to recently for my third playthrough. Um, I've been on it, so I loved it, and it was a game that I knew was great, but just it was kind of like a tone mismatch with my personal and professional life at the time that it came out. I knew that everyone was telling me the game was great. Visually, it's still arresting. It's still beautiful. Um, but I just, due to that kind of disconnect in my professional life, I couldn't play Witcher 3 at the time that it came out. So, and it was kind of nice actually to revisit, to find like a surprise in my library. I was looking for something to play, and I was like, oh, you know what? I never actually got around to putting the time in on this, and I didn't spend and it was a rewarding like 60-hour experience.
I have two of them. And they're both actually very popular titles. And the one was because I was a stupid 17-year-old. And then the other was because my computer couldn't handle it. So I got completely pushed off from
Mm.
it. So the first one was when I was 17, I had a PS2, and my parents for Christmas bought me Kingdom Hearts. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's got Final Fantasy in it. I'm like, how would I want to play as a kid? Oh, it's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. Is a disassociation of playing as a child hero. Anyway, moving on. So I played a little bit of it, and I got to like where the first time you build your ship within the gummy system, I'm kind of like controller down, and I didn't touch it, and I didn't touch it for a long while, and then a buddy of mine came over one night, and he was playing it, and I was watching him play it, and he got to the first like real world, and he started getting through. And I'm like, this is kind of interesting. And then he took off. He had to go home, and I think he was actually visiting from out of state. So I kind of picked up the file from where he was, and I
Mm.
ended up loving the game. And I'm like, man, and like it was months after. I mean, I had completely missed the hype train on it. I'm
Mhm.
like, damn, this game is good. And like, really, I ground all the way to get the final sword. I beat Sephiroth. I mean, I did all of the big things with it. And I'm like, why didn't I like this at first? And I look back and I can't really depict the same reason why I didn't like it. It was just kind of like, again, that disassociation with a child hero. And that's again another topic for another day. The other one, this is a huge title, and I didn't have the graphics card to be able to run it, was Skyrim. So it was
Mm.
actually when you were over my house is when I got my brand new video card to be able to play Skyrim. I couldn't run it. So it would actually freeze in the first cave. And I was excited. I mean, I'm talking like I bought Skyrim like this is cool. Like I loved Oblivion. I didn't beat Oblivion. I don't even think I started the first quest as Oblivion, but I have hundreds of hours on Oblivion just beating the side quests. That's how good they are.
As any,
So
yeah, as it should be with any Elder Scrolls games.
right, so I go in the Skyrim and it dies. Like my computer's just like, nope, bite my ass. You're not gonna this game ain't playing. So I had to wait to like get enough money to buy a new video card.
Mhm.
And video cards like that time, I think that I got a GTX 660, which I got it when it was newer,
Right.
and it was like, nah, man, like that's expensive. Like it was like 200 something bucks. I'm like, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, but when you're, working and trying to eat, like food comes first. So it wasn't
Yeah.
a priority. So I finally got it, and then I picked it up and I got into Skyrim, and I'm like, all right, cool, this is fun, and I stopped. Like I got like to like part of it, and I'm like, huh, yeah, okay, I'm good, and I left.
Had it just been too long?
Right, it had been so long that like my dire interest to like dive into this game was gone, and I'm like, why? Why was I so hyped for it? And then you came over, and I'm watching you play, and you're blowing up stuff, and I'm like, that looks cool again. So I finally played it, and now I have like, I don't know, scroll up, scroll up, scroll up. I have 190 hours sitting in it. Most of the time, I think I've only beaten the game once. The rest of it's me playing what's called the Go Left challenge, where instead of going right towards town when you get out of the first cave, you go left and you wander the rest of the world. And one of the first things that you fight will kill you. So it's usually a good struggle for people who want to take the game and go a little bit differently. But yeah, those are two games, and it was nothing more than me just like over assuming how good it was, and then not or like building up the hype and the hype fading too quickly,
Mhm.
and then someone reinvigorating it for
So I think to maybe summarize what we were talking about here, it seems like we've got games that end up in our back catalog for. I heard a couple of refrains. Um, One was just kind of the desire to own, that kind of collector impulse, and I think that's a big Nintendo boon. I think Nintendo manages to sell their games on the what's their digital
me.
platform called?
Oh, it's the well, it's just what is it called?
It's not
It's got so many names.
it's not Nintendo Arcade or anything.
No, sorry, I'm pulling up my actual Wii U. It's just called the Nintendo eShop. So
Yeah,
if you can see my 3DS screen, there it is.
so they sell these games over and over and over again, their classic library, and you play them sometimes, or at least I do, but not that much.
Right.
And some games I purchase that I knew were good, and because I consider myself a gamer, I I think, oh, a gamer should own this, so I pick it up, which is true. I'll be frank, I don't play many of the Zelda games. I really got into Zelda with Wind Waker. Yeah, I know. Um, but but
I'm sorry.
but so I purchased a lot of these games because it was just like, oh, this is what gamers own, so I bought them. Or
Right.
these games end up in your back catalog because you purchase them out of a sense of nostalgia. For
Hmm.
example, I have the PC remaster of Fable sitting in my library right now. I picked it up because I had fun playing Fable. It was disappointing, like it didn't live up to the hype, but it was still an enjoyable game. I remembered it being enjoyable, and I thought, oh, with the up-res graphics, it'll be a good time. It's fine. it let me down again. I got burned twice by the same game.
Oh,
But it's sitting there. It's sitting there in my library, largely unplayed, um, because I picked it up out of a sense of nostalgia. And then for me, and I heard you talk about this as well. Another reason it seems like games drift into your back catalog, games you might touch a little bit and then they fall away for a while because of kind of a tonal mismatch with some point in your life. You talked about being a teenager and not wanting to play a game with a child as a protagonist and reacting negatively to that. I talked about Witcher 3 and just my professional life not affording me maybe the time, or I wanted a game that wasn't so stressful. And so I just it didn't hold my interest the way that I thought it should or could. Um, and so it seems like there's these recurring themes that take a game from an immediate purchase and go straight past the play period and right into sitting collecting proverbial dust, figurative dust,
yeah.
in your digital libraries.
So for our viewers, what games do you have sitting in your back catalog, either physical behind you or sitting in some library? Leave what games you have in the comments below. With that, that's all this week. This has been the Video Game Review. I'm John,
I'm Colin.
and if you like what you see, please subscribe, share. If you didn't, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear it so we can improve. And with that, we'll see you next week.